tell you a quick story about a time, and maybe you've been in a meeting like this. I was at a meeting where there was maybe a group of about 10 or 15 people who were discussing some hot button issues of the day, and you can imagine what they were. I mean, the politically incorrect things to talk about. And nobody really agreed with one another about anything that was being said. There's one person, you could just see the veins on his neck begin to pop out as we talked about these. Finally, he said, "I'm offended by that." Oh, that means shut up. I reject what you're saying. Keep it to yourself. That's kind of a violent, I'm offended. It was a chilling experience. And we see that same kind of thing today in the gospel where Jesus comes into his hometown. If you want to turn with me to Mark chapter 6, beginning at verse 1. You might just keep it open there because we'll kind of come back to this a couple of times this morning. I think it's page 995 in the Pew Bible, 995 in the Pew Bible. And it says that Jesus comes to his hometown, and the people there see him, and we see people taking offense at Jesus. Basically, the whole episode that we're going to read about here is the people of Nazareth who have known Jesus a long time saying to him, "I'm offended by you. I'm offended. Shut up. I don't want to hear it." And so there he is in his hometown, and with his disciples following, as disciples are supposed to do. And when worship day comes along, he goes to synagogue, or we might say he goes to church, and he's the guest preacher there in his home church. And he begins to proclaim a message that was powerful. And we actually can make a pretty good assumption about what he was preaching about, but we don't have time for that today, but I'll just say it was a powerful message about God's reign and rule, that God's in charge. And Jesus was doing something that we'll see shocked them, because in verse 4 of chapter 6, in verse 3, at the end of that, it says they say they took offense at him. They took offense. They were also awestruck. Said, where do you get this stuff? It is amazing. And the word that's translated here in the NIV at the end of verse 2 says they heard him and they were amazed. And really the translation of the word there is they were shocked by what he had to say. It shook them. It's not a positive, it's not like, wow, that's amazing. Like, no, they were stunned and they didn't like it. And they say, where does this guy get off saying this? By the way, you notice they quit calling him Jesus? They say, where does this man, keep him in arms, like, where does this man get off saying this stuff? Where do you get this wisdom? After all, isn't this guy a carpenter? He doesn't have any professional degrees. He's not a philosopher or a doctor. I mean, he's a mechanic. Well, no, he's a carpenter. This guy's blue collar. What's he doing standing up carrying on like this with wisdom? Especially wisdom that isn't the stuff that we're used to. Where did he get all this stuff? And if you're just curious for a moment, you don't have to turn there, but listen to this. John chapter 1, the prologue to John's gospel. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Now we're talking about Jesus the Christ, the second person of the Trinity, God the Son. The one who's there now standing around in Nazareth says, through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. Verse 10. he was in the world, this Jesus of Nazareth, the Christ. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world didn't recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. He comes to his hometown, and he has all of the authority of God himself, which he is, and fully human. He comes to his hometown, and they were offended. He came to his own, and they received him not. Isn't that heartbreaking? I mean, it really tears my heart up every time I read or hear that gospel. His reaction there in Nazareth was to say, I'm offended. I reject that. I reject what you stand for and what you're teaching, Jesus. We're shocked, and we don't want it. It was a visceral reaction, gut deep, angry, kind of a violent, hostile response. In fact, the word offended, they took offense at Jesus. When you kind of read that on the surface, it said, oh, they took offense at Jesus, sweet and mild. Now it says that they were scandalized by him. The Greek word there that we translate offended, scandalizomai. They were scandalized by Jesus. So why? Why take offense at Jesus? Well, I'll tell you, this is like looking at a diamond. You can see something different from every angle, and there are many reasons why people could have been and were offended by Jesus. I want to look at one thing that's peculiar to Nazareth. They knew him. At least they thought they did. They have what I'd call presumed familiarity. I mean, they've been around this guy. Carpenter. He's Mary's son. Now, again, that's sort of on the surface. You think, well, yeah, he is. But in a Jewish society, that is a huge put down. That's a deep-cutting insult. Even though Jesus' biological father was not Joseph, he was sometimes referred to in the Bible as Jesus bar Joseph, not Jesus bar Mary. In a Jewish society, your heritage is through the patrilineal side of the family. And for them to call him Mary's son means we don't really know who his father is. Well, it's true, they didn't, did they? But not for the reasons that they thought. They thought, well, you know, Joseph and Mary got married, and gosh, she seemed kind of big. And, you know, they haven't been married 3 or 4 months, and Jesus was born. Who was his father anyway? It's that kind of familiarity that they thought they knew all about Jesus. And, you know, besides his brothers and sisters, they're here. We know this guy. We saw him there at Nazareth Elementary. You know, we saw him in Sunday school. We know this guy. So where does he get off? So their presumed familiarity actually turned to contempt and offense. Based on what they thought they knew about Jesus, which was not a lot, they misunderstood him. They became offended, and they rejected him. And their rejection of Jesus led to profound ignorance. They didn't get it. They didn't get who Jesus was. They didn't get what Jesus was talking about. And they blocked themselves off so they were unable to receive the gifts and the power that Jesus could have gently and graciously given them. Now, I'm going to take a risky move right now in this message, and I may offend you by what I'm about to say.
To make a monetary gift that supports the ministries of Christ Church Plano, visit christchurchplano.org.